This is the Sterling Goodbyes podcast with me, Karen Rice. This is being recorded remotely due to the COVID-19 restrictions. I'm joined today by Carole Caudwell from Crawley in Sussex, who lost her mother, Irene, originally from Liverpool, to COVID-19 in April this year. Welcome, Carole.
Hi, Karen. Thanks for having me.
And thanks for sharing your story with us. What was her most lovable quality?
She loved her family. She was a real family person. And she was, we could all say this about our mums, but she was a really, really kind-hearted person. Her heart was always in the right place.
What do you miss about her on a daily basis?
Talking to her. That's great. Just being there.
Can you describe, obviously you say that she moved to be close to you in Sussex. Can you tell me what happened, how she felt ill?
So she lived with us for up to about 9 months. And then...
How was that 9 months, can I ask? How was that 9 months for you?
It was amazing. We had 2 arguments, which was quite funny, but... we had a couple of arguments, but in general it worked really, really well. She was very, very fond of my husband. She kind of felt it was like, because I've got a brother, but he lives in Blackpool, and she looked on my husband as a second son, really, and they got on brilliantly. He always used to call her the old bat, and that was his name for her, and it stuck. But no, it was a really, really lovely time, because I felt like I was able to kind of do the mother and daughter things that perhaps we'd not done in the years, that she was living in Liverpool and I was down here. I mean, I used to go and visit her all the time, but it wasn't quite the same as being there. So I for me and for her, we both enjoyed that sort of having that company and taking her out for lunch and things like that. So
do you have a sort of treasured moment from that 9 months?
Yeah. I do, yes. It was her 80th birthday, and as a surprise for her, I booked some tickets to go and see the Jersey Boys. She's a massive, massive fan. And I didn't tell her. I just went up there and I sort of had a video of like me arriving and sort of surprising her, and she was, ooh. And I took her to the show, took her to a really, really beautiful hotel where we had dinner, and she just said, this is just the best day ever, and I'll never forget that.
That's lovely.
So, very special.
I wanted to ask you what your mother, Irene, was like, both as a person and as a mother.
Oh, well, she was quite a strong lady, very strong lady. She had a very varied life to start with. She was, because she was from Liverpool, she worked in the Empire Theatre, so she met lots of stars, and she used to work in the Cavern for a couple of years after that, and she was quite friendly with some of the people. So she's got lots of stories to tell, which was amazing. She never boasted about it, but it was something that she was very proud of.
Who did she meet?
So,
who did she meet and what?
She met the Beatles. She met Cilla Black. Billy Fury was actually my uncle's, like my mom's brother. She was actually my uncle's best friend. They worked on the tugs together, and they remained best friends for years afterwards. And apparently I used to sit on Billy Fury's knee when he used to come around the house, but obviously I was too young to remember, so I can't remember that.
Can you share, just backtracking a little bit, can you share what she said about Cilla Black and which Beatles she met and any of her reflections on those people?
She wasn't keen on Paul McCartney. She thought he was up himself a little bit, but she said John Lennon and George Harrison were lovely. Ringo Starr was a bit more aloof. So she wasn't, as I say, she wasn't overly keen on Paul McCartney. She used to know his mother, his auntie or something. So, and she was like, oh, Paul's like this, he's leaving to it sort of thing. Cilla Black was absolutely lovely, really, really, and very modest, wasn't boastful or anything like that. She had a voice, and she said she used it, and got where she was. So, but Jerry and the Pacemakers, she lived around the corner from Jerry Marsden, and she said he was just amazing. She went to school with a couple of footballers that were back in the Liverpool team. She loved Liverpool Football Club. They were her passion. So yeah, she was
pretty well connected then.
Yeah, she was. And it's nice to know that history's there, you know.
So those last 9 months, obviously very special with your mum in Sussex. So can you describe what happened, how she felt ill?
So she fell ill literally 9 months after she'd been with us. It was December 18, I think it was. And I took her, we were going out for lunch, we were going Christmas shopping. And I was meant to be working that day. And I had a phone call the day before to say, would I swap? So I said, yeah, that's fine. And I would have been out for like 9 hours because I work at the airport. So I swapped my day off and went across the road to go. She wanted to go and draw some money out to go Christmas shopping. And she collapsed on me with a stroke, which I knew straight away what was happening. So managed to get her into hospital very quickly. And she, you know, they said she had no chance. She was going to die. It was awful. And she fought back and, you know, from having not been able to speak or swallow or anything like that, she came back to, she had a few disabilities when she kind of, you know, resumed normal life, shall we say. She recovered from the stroke.
That's
really,
amazing.
really well. Well, she had 4 in one go. So that's why they said she wasn't going to make it.
Sorry, but 4 strokes in one go.
Yeah. And she was 81 then. Yeah, and I think you know, just so much strength, and she wanted to live. You know, she was like, I've got too much to live for. I'm going nowhere. It was that kind of thing.
Did she make a full recovery, or?
She made a recovery to the point where she couldn't walk very well, but she could still, you know, do things, and she could still sort of, we could take her out. We bought a van, like a travel thing, so we could take her out, you know, in the wheelchair rather than having to walk round. So yeah, she was, for her, she was in a better place than she could have been. But it upset her that she'd had the strokes, and it was a long way, because for those 4, I mean, she was 4 months in hospital with rehab and everything, and I never left. I literally went into hospital with her that day, and I never came home for 6 weeks. I just stayed in the hospital the whole time. And then we brought her back here. We got the house converted so that she could come back here, and then she decided she wanted somewhere of her own because she wanted that independence. And she said, you know, because she used to have carers coming in twice a day, and it was, you know, I'd really like to sort of not have this happening in your home all the time. Somebody suggested that, you know, we've got this beautiful, like, self-contained flat within like a sort of lovely place, but they have carers there all the time. So she'd have somebody there all the time, which obviously I was going to work and I wasn't here, you know, constantly. So she found that much better, and they really looked after her well. They really did. They were lovely, because the carers we had here were dreadful. So it was kind of really bad. We had safeguardings and everything. It was awful. So yeah, she then eventually moved out literally just around the corner from me in a really nice place. It gave her the independence that she craved, you know, that she'd always had. And I used to go around there every single day, and we cooked, like my husband would cook dinner for her. We'd take it round for her when he'd pick me up from work, take it round there. And I think that's what I miss a lot since, you know, before lockdown. I was there every day. I'd do a 12-hour day sometimes. I'd still go around there because I just felt it important. You know, I knew she could be on borrowed time from having strokes. So I wanted to make the most of every day I had with her, you know. So, and then leading up to that, she was in bed one day, and I said to her, are you okay? And she said, oh, I just feel a bit tired. And she was coughing. And then they said, oh, she's got a little bit of asthma there, but nothing to worry about.
When was that, Carole?
That was 3 weeks. That was just before lockdown. So it would have been towards the end of March. I was still working then. And then we kind of finished work around like 26th of March. And I got a phone call from the carers to say that she needs to go into hospital because her breathing wasn't very good. So I said, right. So I went straight down to the hospital, which is down the road, literally from where I was working. I went straight from work, and they kept it. And they said, look, we don't want to keep her in too long because, you know, we've got the virus that's just starting to kind of come around. But I wasn't masked up or anything like that. It wasn't really kind of known as much then. And anyway, she was in for 2 days. They sorted her out. She was sent home. And then she went back in again, and I was allowed to go and see her for an hour. And they said, you know, her breather, they tested her twice for coronavirus, and they both came back negative. And they said, oh, you can only stay for an hour because you're on a COVID ward. And I said, well, why is she on a COVID ward? And they said, well, we haven't really got anywhere else to put her. And I said, but she's 82 years old. She's got no COVID and you've got her on a COVID ward. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't. Well, there's nowhere else we can put her. You know, we've had to split the ward and you know, the ward is rife. The hospital is rife with COVID. And I'm like, oh my God, you know, well, you've got to make sure you do all the washing of your hands as you go out. And obviously then I panicked for a week because then I had a little bit of a cough afterwards. They told me I couldn't go back and see her. And I saw her in the bed that day, and then she was in there for another 10 days. And they tested her, and they said to me, we'll move her. And they moved her while I was there to a different ward. And I went home feeling quite happy, you know. And the next morning I rang in, because I rang every morning, every night, because they said I couldn't go back in and see her then, because then it was just on lockdown. And I rang up the next morning, and they'd moved her back to the COVID ward again while I wasn't there. And I was just livid. I was absolutely livid. I can't tell you what I said. And I said, you know, I'm clapping for you guys. I said, and you're doing that to her. And they said, well, you know, we're running out of places. And I said, well, but she's not COVID. You've tested her. And then literally the cough got worse. I was speaking to her on the phone every day. They would give her the phone to, you know, talk to her every day. And I could hear her getting worse. And I said, look, what are you doing? She's getting worse. We've had to test her again. Of course, they tested her again. She was positive.
Oh my word.
And I just said, I'm sorry, but I'm blaming you for this. I said, I know you're in a situation where it's unknown. You don't know what you're dealing with. And I know it's hard for you guys. I said, but it did not make sense for somebody that was COVID-free at her age. I said, it just seems like you don't care, like you're killing them off. You know it's going to get her. And, oh, well, it's just another one less to worry about. And that was how my mind was thinking at the time, because it was very stressful. And obviously they were just telling me she was going to die. And they said, we're doing everything we can. And towards the end, it was kind of like I'd have the phone calls with her, and all I would hear with her was her trying to gasp for breath all the time. And they had her on oxygen. And then I spoke to her about 3 days before, and I said to all the family, you need to call her, because I'm not sure she's going to make it, because she sounds dreadful. And I couldn't just accept it. So she managed to talk to everybody, but only just. And I just said to her, Mum, I'm sorry I can't be there with you. Sorry.
It's fine.
And, you know, obviously we all love you. And I managed to get I love you back. And that was it. They rang me the next day and said that she deteriorated. And it was one of the doctors that rang me. And he said, we want to put her into end-of-life care. And I said, what? And he said, she needs to go into end-of-life care. And I said, what does that mean? I kind of knew what it meant, but my head was all over the place. And he said, well, we want to take her off all her medication and put her on a cocktail of drugs, you know, drive her. And I said, oh, you want to kill her then, basically? Euthanize her. That's what you want to do. And he said, oh, no, it's totally the opposite. And I said, that's not how it feels for me. That seems like you've given up on her. And he said, no, we just want her to die peacefully and not from, you know, this is a really horrible virus that is not a nice death from. He said, I'm being brutally honest with you. You know, he said, we want to take her off the drugs and give her something that will help her to pass away peacefully. And I said, you're still euthanizing her. I'm sorry, but that's how you know. And he said, well, you can think of it as you want. And then he got a little bit, you know, he said, but she's got no DNR in place. He said, that's because she didn't want one.
Do you not resuscitate?
Yeah, she didn't want that. She said, I want to be resuscitated. If something happens, I want to be resuscitated. And she knew all the risks. And he said, but we could break her ribs. I said, but she knows that. And that's why she hasn't got one. Well, she needs one. And I said, but she didn't want one. She had that choice before when she had her stroke. I said, and she told the guy then she didn't want one. She wanted that chance, you know. He said, right, okay, well, it's your choice then. And I said, well, yeah, it is, because it's hers. She was able to make that decision for herself. And then he said to me, well, you know, she is really, he said, as a doctor, I can't watch her. He said, you're not here. I said, no, I'm not. I said, so why can't I come in and be with her? And he said, well, you could do, but I'm telling you now, you're very likely to get the COVID virus because we can't protect you. And he said, even with PPE, he said, we are so rife in here with it. He said, I can't guarantee you're not going to get it. And he said, I'd rather you didn't come in. And at that point I was like, so are you trying to hide something from me? You know, because then your mind's working overtime. And I know for a fact that when I was working at the airport at the beginning of the pandemic, my mum was really scared for me. And she said, you know, you're meeting all them people constantly from all over the world, and they could be bringing the virus in. And I'm really worried that you're going to get this. So don't do anything to kind of... So I knew for a fact that if she thought there was any risk involved, she would not want me to go in there just to see her. I know she wouldn't. So it kind of made me realise that I asked the family and they all said exactly the same thing. So they were telling me they didn't want me in anyway. I said, can I speak to her? Is she able to talk? And he said, not really. He said, but I'll put her on. And he put her on the phone, and it was just awful. It was awful. It was just constantly. And I just said, take the phone away, please. Told her I loved her. And then that was it. He said it'll take a few days. She was gone the next day. Gone. And that was it, really. So
how do you feel about the fact that you couldn't be with her, holding her?
I'm guilty.
Even though it's not your fault?
I kind of feel that maybe I should have just stood my ground and said, okay, what you say, I'm coming in. But at the same time, my husband's shielding. He's got health issues and he's had to shield. And I knew for a fact that if there was a high risk, she would not have wanted me to have taken that risk. I know she wouldn't. But it doesn't stop me feeling guilty as to, and I keep feeling, you know, did they end her life prematurely, or did they do the right thing? There's so many questions. They said, oh, we had somebody there with her. She passed away with somebody there with her. How do I know that? I don't know that. You know, and then they left her, you know, in the ward for almost 3 hours dead because they had no room in the mortuary. And I still couldn't see her. Couldn't have anything of her.
Which hospital was that, Carole?
East Surrey.
So she passed. They telephoned you to let you know that, or?
They rang me. I knew as soon as I had a call around about 9:30 in the morning, and they said that she'd just passed away. And she said she just kind of went to sleep and that was it. But I don't know that. I wasn't there. I didn't see, you know, I couldn't hold her hand. I don't know if anyone was there. And I was just angry that they put somebody that was COVID-free on a COVID ward.
What's happened since your mum passed?
Well, I had a chat with the medical examiner who rang me about 2 days later. Obviously, I had to register the death, so you have to go through all the rigmarole of that. And then the medical examiner rang me because obviously everything was being done remotely. And he said, I'm really sorry about your mum passing away. He said, we couldn't put her on a ventilator because it was too intrusive at her age with her other health conditions. And he said, we would have struggled to get the tube down, but he said we wouldn't have got it back out. So he said we couldn't do that. He said, but actually, he said, what we're finding is that people that are on a ventilator aren't doing as well for some reason. We don't know why. It's kind of almost like a death sentence when they go onto the ventilator. So he was very upfront. He was very honest. And, you know, he said, look, the guys have done their best here. And I just said to him, I said, yeah, but, you know, they stopped her meds and they didn't carry on treating her. And whilst I understand to a degree why, I said, I just feel like they were killing her off in a way, you know. He said, unfortunately, it definitely was COVID. He said, that's what will be going on the death certificate. He said, we've seen it on the x-rays. And he said, it's come back in the bloods. Well, I said, okay then, because I was very aware then that COVID was just starting to be put on people's death certificates when it wasn't COVID. So I wanted to be absolutely sure. And he said, and I've asked for the records. I said, I want to see all the records. So that just takes time to come through. So then it was arranging a funeral. And that was just awful because the guys were absolutely amazing in the best way they could be under the circumstances. But I couldn't have she had to be locked and contained in a box or whatever in the hospital. So, and it wasn't allowed to be opened again. So I couldn't have a lock of her hair. I couldn't have I couldn't put anything in the coffin with her. I couldn't see her in the chapel of rest. I couldn't see her in the funeral directors. It was just COVID-19 that they have to write on the top, and they have to go all PPE equipment on and everything, and I couldn't dress her in anything. She was just, I just feel really, I feel robbed, not just of her, but of everything that goes with a death. It just wasn't normal, I didn't see her for 3 weeks, and then when she needed us, they wouldn't let me be there. I had some counselling, and she said to me, I don't know what to do with you. She was very honest. I don't know what to do with you. She said, I've never come across anything like this before. Like she said, there's a car accident or a plane crash or something like that. It's horrible. It's a death. But you get to complete that grieving process. We've not been able to grieve as a family. Even when we got to the, it was all arranged remotely. Instead of her having 100 odd people there, which she would have done, because people want to travel down from up north to sort of, she had 5. And that was just my family from here. My brother wasn't allowed to travel at that time, so even he couldn't go to the funeral. So he is now, he's up here. He's really struggling now because he said, she's not had a funeral. It's not a funeral. It's not, until we get together as a family. So he's not even accepting we've had to have a funeral. It doesn't feel like a funeral. It doesn't feel real. And, even on the day, me and my 2 daughters, we had to stay separately, so many, 2 meters apart. And then it was like the vicar came up to us and he was like 2 meters apart. We could see her arriving, and they stopped for ages because there was such a backlog going through. And then when they brought her up, it was just awful. And they said, nobody can, none of us can carry her in. It's got to be them. And we'll tell you when it's okay to come in. I want to follow my mum in, And we went in there and they sat us as far away as they could away from where she was. And it's just robbed us of everything. Really has. Just couldn't do anything as a family. We couldn't hug each other. We just had to sit there crying in the church individually on our own. And I could hear my daughters behind me grieving, It was awful. And I couldn't comfort them, couldn't be with them. And even afterwards when we came out, we all had to go separately. And it was just horrible. And I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. I really wouldn't, not this. And it's going to be very, very hard to get over.
What keeps you awake at night?
Guilt. Guilt that maybe I could have done more. I don't know. I was kind of helping to care for her. And as I say, I used to see her every day. And could I have done more to help her? Could I have stopped her having to go into hospital? If she hadn't gone into hospital, she would still be here now. She should never have caught it in hospital. There should have been things in place back then, she died right in the middle of the pandemic when it was at its peak. And it shouldn't have happened.
What's the one thing you wish people understood about all of this?
That it's real. That it is very, very real. And I when I see on the pictures, and I know pictures can be distorted and they can be played around with, but I've seen it on the news reports, and they're not going to report it. I look at that as more fact, I think, what I see on the TV rather than on social media. And I look at it and I think, well, why are you sitting there on the beach, just not social distancing? And I heard, they interviewed somebody and he said, oh, it's not there now. It's gone. I don't think it's even there. And I thought, no, because you haven't lost anybody to it, so you don't understand. I've seen it. I've heard it. I've heard what it does. I've seen what it does. And you guys, you're not taking it seriously. And I think that is the general consensus in this country at the moment. I don't think as a nation we've taken it seriously enough. I think we've been in lockdown for that long now that people are just saying, oh, well, just want to get out, just want to go to the pub. I had a call on Friday from where my mum lives, or where she lived in the complex, and they said, whilst we're still on lockdown, we would like you to come and clear Mum's flat for us. You need to wear all the PPE. So I was dreading that, but I knew it had to be done. So I had to go yesterday, and I spent all day there yesterday doing that, and it was the most traumatic thing I think I've ever had to do. I was a mess. I walked in and everything was just there, but not her, and really hit me. And I think whereas I knew she was gone, it still felt, because we've been in lockdown, it felt like she was in lockdown to a degree. And when I got there yesterday and saw all her stuff and opened the wardrobe with all their new clothes that we'd bought together, that still had labels on them, and that was hard. So yeah, that was awful. And I felt like I was intruding in a way. She wouldn't think of it that way, but I felt like I was intruding because I was having to go through all her stuff and throw things away or keep things, or and it wasn't nice. And it was a really, really tough day. Really tough day. One nice thing that came out of it, something I came across, and it was a 4-page love letter from my dad to my mum, written in 1959 when he was in the army, and how much he loved her and how much he was could wait to come back and see her, and they were going to make a life together, and he wanted to marry her, and there was kisses everywhere, and Swalk and Holland and things like that. It was just, and it was really sad, and I sobbed like a baby when I was reading it, and she wouldn't have minded me reading it, but it's something I can keep. It's something of theirs that I can treasure, and the fact that they loved each other so much, and the fact that I didn't realise it would have survived all these years, but it has. And he had a photograph wrapped in it of him in his beret, when he was younger and when he was in the army in Cyprus, and it was just, it's actually something that I've taken away from that, something positive, and I can but it did bring back about the death of my dad, and that really hit me yesterday big time. But they're together now, they're reuniting, they're together, so they would, for me, it was like that was the start of their story. They met in Liverpool, and then my dad got commissioned, because obviously conscription was in then, and he got conscripted out to Cyprus. They'd met and they wanted to be together, and he got conscripted to Cyprus for 3 years. And he just kept saying, in this letter, I don't want to have to do the 3 years because I'm desperate to see you and I want to be with you. And it was just love, literally, how much it was all my darling, my darling, my darling all the way through. It was just amazing, because that's how they used to talk to each other back then. And it was just lovely to read all the way through. And he said, I'll be home soon. I've saved up £50 out of my wages. And he said, I've been saving for all this time, and that's enough for us to get married and have and put a deposit down on a house, sort of thing. So
wonderful.
It was just lovely. And it is something I will treasure forever, But they are reunited now. She's been a long time without him, and they're together. So that's the only positive thing I can get out of this.
So what's the most important message you want to share with the world?
I'd like the government to be a bit more stricter with the way they're handling this. And if they say lockdown, it means lockdown. No mamby-pambying. No, we trust people, and you can't trust the people here. We can't. I'm not talking about everybody, but in general, we can't trust the general public. They're not sensible. And we don't want to come across as authoritarian. We want it, we don't want to be dictatorial, but you have to be with people sometimes, because that's the only way we're going to get rid of it. You have to lock down. And people need to know this is real. It's not gone away. It's not going away. Chris Whittier said it's going to be with us for a while yet. I don't see any vaccine coming soon. If there was, I'd be a little bit reluctant myself to take it, because I'm not an anti-vaxxer. But I think something that is brought in very quickly, I would be a bit wary of. Treatments, brilliant. If they can bring treatments in for it, amazing. But, we're still stuck in lockdown here because of people that are going out and don't give two stuffs, and they're out there spreading it, because a lot of people have it and don't realise. They're asymptomatic. They don't know they've got it. And I understand to a point why they like it and why they're doing it. But come on, guys, get real. This is going to be with us. And actually, you might feel you're safe now, but come the autumn and the winter, when the weather gets colder and it does better, You're going to have far more cases. And without a doubt, we are going to have second and third and fourth waves, I expect. Maybe smaller, but they're already saying, you know, one of the Sage guys was saying that he feels it might be bigger. You know, people have got to take notice, and they have got to get back to normal life, but stay within that social distance. You've got to. Because if you don't, you might not get it, but you're going to pass it to somebody that in your family, and they're going to die. Simple as. It hits a lot of people without underlying conditions.
Okay, thank you, Carole. Thank you for sharing that, what's happened to you. It's very moving.